Here it is, guys, the second battery for the Segway Xyber. All right, so apologies for the delay on the follow-up video with the Segway Xyber, but there were some shipping delays with the second battery, but we finally got it in-house. Looks like another battery tray. All right, guys, here it is, the second battery. Looks like it has the same design and the same exact specs as the original battery. Original battery is about 24 pounds. The new battery, just about the same. You're looking at a total of about 50 pounds for both batteries, so that's definitely going to make the Segway Xyber a lot heavier, but hopefully with the gain in weight, we'll also get a gain in power, torque, and top speed. So we got a second battery strap. We have two battery plates, fixing plate, it says, and then this is the battery base. Then we have the dual battery discharge harness. This giant wire connects to the controller, it looks like. You have a positive and negative terminal. Looks like a 4-pin and a 3-pin. This will connect both batteries, I'm assuming in parallel. So the 48 volt 30 amp hours should be doubled to 60 amp hours, I think. Then you also have this cable over here, which is a dual charging expansion cable. So this will go into the charger, so, and then you could charge both batteries off one charger. Very convenient. So now that we know what to do, we'll just get right to it. I gotta say, it wasn't as easy as I thought it would be. Basically, you have to get into the controller, which means you have to remove this plastic and then install like this giant harness, right? So compared to the stock harness, it's just a little bit thicker. So you have to route it a certain way along the controller. You have to remove the plastic on the controller to get to the terminals. Remove the terminals, install those on, as well as the harness connectors as well. So yeah, I mean, it's not hard per se, but it definitely took like an hour because I didn't want to mess anything up. If you're not familiar with like modding e-bikes, it may take you just a little bit longer. Hopefully Segway will release a video to make it a little bit easier to walk through it. Just on the printed directions though, it was a little vague, right? Not a lot of close-ups on how to remove certain things. But if you have any questions, definitely hit me up in the comments. I didn't really want to go through it step by step because I was still figuring it out. The plastic up here was a little tricky just to get these giant battery wires through the plastic. And then you just kind of have to force it together. And then installing the battery plate, I put these bolts on the wrong side. These holes are too big. They just lift up and they don't actually secure the plate. And then also for the battery, I think the directions were a little bit confusing. For the plate on the battery side, you want to make sure that these grooves, like the big grooves, are in the front so that they could slide into these grooves. So I had it on backwards. I had like the narrow slot on the other side. It was getting stuck like inside of the frame. And one more thing, you have to add a zip tie to the front strap. And you want to use like a really small zip tie so that it doesn't actually get in the way of the battery. If the zip tie is too thick, it's going to prevent the battery from sliding in. That's something that wasn't in the directions as well, so I just figured that out. So you take the first battery and you kind of just carefully slide it into the center. Make sure that the battery strap is not in the way. There you go. Then you just take the battery strap, pull it through. Okay, before you strap it in, you want to make sure that the first battery cable is connected. So this is going to be the shorter one, right? Push it in here and then pull down and then take the strap here. There you go. So battery 1 is connected, and then we install the second battery. Take the strap, push it through the carrying handle, carefully slide it in. Okay, then you take your keys, turn it counterclockwise to lock it in. And then you take the long battery discharge cable, push it in. Okay, you take the strap, hook it on, and you pull. All right, good to go. Everything looks good, everything looks secure. And then you just close the panel and you are good to go. So let's connect the app and take a look at the batteries here. Slide to unlock. Power button. Okay, so it looks like the bike is connected and we are going to open the battery tab. So I'm not exactly sure which is the front or the rear battery. My guess is main 1 is the front battery and main 2 is the rear. So that's pretty cool. You have all of your data over here. You have the percentage of each battery, the voltage, and then the temperature. So it looks like the first battery is not bound to the app, so we'll bind it right now. Hit bind. Okay, so it looks like it's working. I don't think there's anything else we have to do. So before we start riding, let's charge up the batteries so they're both at 100%, and I'll show you guys how that works right now. This is the splitter. You just have to line up the connectors like so. Push that in. Good to go. Open the bike up. We'll have to remove this. All right, so we have the charging ports open over here. We have access to it. All right, so the short side, we'll put that one in first. That's in. And then the second port. All right, good to go. So it looks like our charger is doing its thing. And according to the display, we have 3 hours and 5 minutes until fully charged. See if that matches up. Yep, and it looks like both batteries are connected and are charging.
One debt to society later.
All right, so a really cool accessory that we just got is the Segway Xyber middle hard shell bag. So this is a really useful accessory for carrying some valuables. It's a hard shell, right? And it fits right into the frame of the bike, like right above the batteries. So it fills this gap over here. And yeah, plenty of room. You have 2 zippers, one on the left and then one on the right side. So yeah, this bike, doesn't come with a rack, but this is a good way to, bring your water bottle, maybe your wallet, sunglasses, whatever you want to put in here. And it really matches the lines of the Xyber. So it actually, kind of doesn't really look like a bag from far away. It almost looks like part of the frame. So design-wise, I think that's really cool. This is available on the Segway website. And really, I don't know if there's any other bag that would fit properly into this frame. So highly recommended. All right, guys, first ride with the dual battery setup on the Segway Xyber. I gotta say, acceleration is so much better. You definitely feel the throttle ramp just way more responsive. The motor is way more responsive. Obviously, the bike is heavier with the 2 batteries, but I think it really feels like it's unlocked. I am capping out at about 33 miles per hour on the display, but outside of that, the acceleration is for sure way more improved, 100%. Let's make our way over here and initiate the Draggy app so we can actually measure the acceleration. Now, I've never used this app before, so bear with me, but it should record my 0 to 30 miles per hour acceleration. All right, guys, this is the first test with the Segway Xyber single battery. I'm about 140 pounds. We're using the Draggy GPS app, and we hit 60 feet in 3.62 seconds. 0 to 30 miles per hour in 9.14 seconds. Then we hit a 1/8 mile distance in 17.22 seconds with a top speed of 33.68 miles per hour. Okay, this is our second test ride with a single battery. We're just going the other way. And we hit 60 feet in 3.43 seconds. Full throttle, full pedaling, 0 to 30 miles per hour in 9.39 seconds. Then we hit a 1/8 mile distance in 17.48 seconds with a top speed of 32.22 miles per hour. Okay, this is our third test ride with the dual battery setup. And we hit 60 feet in 3.05 seconds, 0 to 30 miles per hour in 5.16 seconds. So almost double the acceleration compared to the single battery. And then we hit the 1/8 mile distance in 15.61 seconds with a top speed of 34.30 miles per hour. So definitely an increase in the top speed, just a slight increase. All right, this is our fourth test ride, dual battery setup. Here we go, going the other way. 60 feet in 3.01 seconds, 0 to 30 miles per hour in 5.76 seconds. And then we hit the 1/8 mile distance in 15.82 seconds with a top speed of 33.70 miles per hour. Going back is, I guess, a bit of an incline, slightly, but we'll take an average of each of those tests and then we'll compare and contrast some of those numbers. Okay, so we're back from our test ride, got the batteries on the charger to do some more tests, and we also calculated some of the data from the Draggy GPS app. I'll put the data graphic up on the screen so you guys can follow along. So to test the single and dual batteries, basically I unplugged the front battery to do the single and then plugged it back in for the dual. All right, so with the single battery, the Xyber took an average of about 3.5 seconds to cover the first 60 feet, while the dual battery, the number dropped to just 3 seconds. So this means the bike gets off the line much quicker with extra power, but the biggest improvement came in the 0 to 30 mile per hour test. On the single battery, it took an average of around 9.3 seconds to hit 30 miles per hour. With the dual battery, that dropped to just 5.5 seconds, which is a big difference of nearly 4 seconds. So this confirms that the extra battery isn't just adding range, but it's also delivering more power to the system, improving acceleration across the board. Now for the 1/8 mile time, we also saw some solid gains. The single battery setup averaged about 17.35 seconds, while the dual battery setup brought that down to 15.7 seconds. So that's a 1.6 second improvement, which might not seem huge, but in real world riding, it means the bike gets up to speed much faster over a longer stretch of road. Now when it comes to top speed, the difference wasn't as drastic. The single battery setup averaged about 32.95 miles per hour, while the dual battery pushed it slightly higher to 34 miles per hour. So while acceleration saw major improvements, the bike's overall top speed only gained about 1 mile per hour. I think this is just a limitation in the controller. It's probably limited to not go faster, even though it does feel like it can exceed 34, 35 miles per hour. And this is so Segway could keep it quote unquote street legal, which is pretty much a big debate in the comments. Most people think that this does not belong on the bike paths or on the roads, and other people think that it is a bike. So your mileage will vary on that opinion. Now, a big factor behind these differences is the increase in power and torque. So with the single battery, the Xyber is rated at 3,000 watts, while the dual battery setup doubles it to 6,000 watts. So this extra power translates into more torque as well. So 120 Newton meters with one battery and 175 Newton meters with two. So the additional torque explains why the dual battery setup feels so much punchier, especially when accelerating off the line. All right, so what does this all mean? Well, the dual battery setup is more about improving power delivery than drastically increasing the top end speed, and the bike pulls much harder off the line and reaches cruising speed faster, making it feel much more responsive. Honestly, this is really how the Xyber should have come stock. The power to weight ratio feels way more dialed in, and now that I know how the dual battery setup feels, it would really be hard to ride this in single mode. Okay, so now that we got those calculations out of the way, let's do an incline test. All right guys, so here is our hill climb test. First, we're gonna ride up the hill. Now the GPS was a little glitchy. The slope percentage is roughly 3%, and then it goes up to about 12% once we get to the top of the hill. So this is basically our measurement to test the acceleration and the torque. All right, this is the single battery hill climb test 1. Single battery going up the slope here. We hit 60 feet in 3.58 seconds. And that's pretty much all the measurements that Draggy will give us since it only hit 26 miles per hour at the top of the hill. The Draggy app won't show us the 0 to 30. Here's the single battery hill climb test 2. Very similar, 60 feet, 3.64 seconds. And then also a top speed of 26 miles per hour towards the end of the hill, which Draggy won't actually give us the readings on. Okay, here's the dual battery hill climb test 1, and we hit 60 feet in 3.12 seconds, and then 0 to 30 miles per hour in 6.36 seconds. So another thing to mention is that we did hit a top speed of 32 miles per hour at the top of the hill on the dual battery setup. Here's climb 2, and we hit 60 feet in 3.10 seconds, and 0 to 30 miles per hour in 6.45 seconds with a top speed of 32 miles per hour. Okay, so those are our readings. We're not going to crunch the numbers on this one, but the results are pretty obvious. On a single battery, it takes longer to climb a steep incline, and you'll also have a lower top speed. On the dual battery setup, you have faster acceleration and a difference of 6 miles per hour top speed, which makes a huge difference when climbing hills. Okay, now let's do our long range test. We got the Strava app open. We got Paul with us. So it looks like our battery percentage is at 98%. We'll run the calculations after the ride, and then we'll get a better idea of how much real world range we could get out of the Segway Xyber dual battery setup. Start the Strava app. There we go. So let's get to it. Okay, we made it to the botanical garden. This is our halfway point. Started at 98%. We are now down to 88% on the battery. Average speed is 15.26 miles per hour. And our distance from the start is 8.89 miles. Like when we had those straight paths or when we were riding on the road, I kicked it up to race mode and just kind of like pinned the throttle. But when we were on the bike paths with pedestrians and cyclists, I kept it on eco mode.
It's important to remember to keep it within reasonable limits.
So far, so good. I have full confidence that a dual battery setup like this will give you absolutely no range anxiety. So main 1, which is I think the front battery, is reading at 97.9%. Main 2 is 95.5%, with the average being 88% for both batteries. So why do you think there's a discrepancy between the two batteries, even though we charged them simultaneously?
That's because the batteries are isolated from each other. It's a protection design so that you don't have this power surge that goes from the higher battery into the lower battery. They'll remain out of sync somewhat until the higher battery level gets down to the even level, and then they'll both be used equally. So
that's a pretty cool feature if you wanted to monitor your battery health. When you purchase the bike, you could sign up and you basically get a bunch of features free, like all the smart features. Someone on Reddit actually emailed Segway to get more information about that. So they said to him that after the smart service is over, there's going to be a renewal price, basically. So the renewal function is still under development, and I think they're still trying to figure out the pricing. But right now, as soon as you buy the bike, it supports all that free smart tech for 1 year. If the smart service is not renewed, how will it affect the functionality of the Xyber? So they said the Xyber can be ridden normally without renewing the smart service. They also said that functions that rely on the network and cloud data services, such as like the real-time update of vehicle status, locate vehicle positioning, the automatic track recording and abnormality alarm, GPS and app prompts, the remote power on, over-the-air upgrade, low battery intelligent reminder, all that stuff cannot be used without the renewal.
I guess the pricing structure will have a big impact on how many people renew those services. If it's low, like $25 or $29 a year, pretty much everybody's going to keep renewing it annually. But if it's really priced high, like $100 or more, then I think there's going to be some pushback on that. That makes sense because those services will be tied together to the technology that's built in.
Yeah, and it's cloud data, so cloud stuff is not free. So hopefully that explains what happens after your renewal stops. Otherwise, it won't handicap the bike. Okay, so we are finally at our destination for our range test. We have 73% left on the battery, and it looks like our distance was 18.72 miles, average speed of about 15 miles per hour. Then we'll take those numbers and do our calculations.
I've ridden this before, but that's with a single battery. This will be my first time with it in the dual battery mode. We are set to race mode, so I'm gonna give it a try. Oh yeah, this is more like it. Very, very torquey. That extra wattage really adds up. This is a lot more in line with the appearance of this bike. And performance is really even a little bit better than I expected. With good power off the line, and that power carries through all the way through the mid-range and top end. The throttle is nice and smooth too, which makes the power that much more usable. Instead of being jumpy, it takes off, but it takes off in a well-controlled manner. In addition to be able to get you away off the line nicely, this thing will also take you up hills with ease. I don't see anything that would be in a regular ride that could even slow this down. Now it has performance that delivers according to its looks. I don't feel it's lacking in performance in any way. Nice power, nice takeoff, nice smooth, manageable throttle control.
All right, parking lot ride with the Segway Xyber dual battery mode. Go right to race mode, baby. Here we go. And way more acceleration and power right off the line. Now this supposedly unlocks the motor to 6,000 watts, and you could definitely feel the torque increase, right? I mean, this thing feels exactly how it should feel stock. It'd be very hard to go back to single battery mode when you feel how much power this delivers. I feel like the power to weight ratio is way better. Because the bike is so heavy, you kind of need this much acceleration off the line just to stay balanced. So that's a plus. I think where the batteries are located, where they're mounted, it almost feels like, I guess, the entire bike is more balanced, especially when you're kind of leaning into these turns over here. I think with the single battery setup and the low power, I always felt like I was going to tip over, but now I feel just way more in control. You know, with the throttle, it's just way more responsive. You know, I give it a little pedaling, and just like, yeah, instant torque. So much easier to maneuver. Way more responsive. It's like so much more fun with this setup. Yeah, I mean, you got the range, you got the power. I don't know what else to say. I mean, this is really how the bike should have came stock. A single battery setup on this bike is doable. I just don't know if it's really practical. I just think it's way easier to ride, to be honest, with a dual battery, even though it's heavier, right? It's not gonna be like a regular e-bike. It's gonna feel like a moped or a light electric motorcycle. So, you know, storing this thing and like hauling this thing around is not gonna be easy. But the gains that you get with the range and the acceleration, now I could feel comfortable riding this through the streets. With that said, it's still limited to 35 miles per hour, right? So where I live, that's kind of perfect because it's a downtown area. You know, there's a lot of intersections. So this is like the perfect moped style e-bike for that kind of situation. I think next we're going to actually bring it to Detroit Moped Works and let some of the moped riders try it out. But I think the setup now is going to be really, really impressive to them. So anyway, that's all I got. Let's go back and do these calculations to figure out our long range test. Paul, talk to us. What are the numbers?
Okay, we're setting the foundation. We have two 30 amp hour batteries, which gives us 60 total times 48 volts. That's a total watt hour capacity of 2,880 watt hours. We started with the battery at 98%, ended with the battery at 73%. It's a difference of 25% battery that we used. The trip, as far as mileage, was 18.72 miles. The average speed was only around 15. It included lots of slowing down for pedestrians, but it also included lots of excursions in full race mode.
We did, yes, average speed of 15 miles per hour, but we also hit a max speed of 40.6 miles per hour at some point, I'm assuming, when we were on the street somewhere. But you also see some of these spikes here from 25 to 30 to 35 miles per hour, an average speed of 15 miles per hour, but I was definitely opening it up. So this is how I think most people would ride. This is more of like a real world test.
The battery power used was 25%, which equals 720 watt hours total consumed for the trip. That gives us the efficiency rating of using 38.46 watt hours per mile. And when we calculate that out, that gives us a total range, estimated range of 74.88 miles when used like this in real world with lots of race mode and open throttle.
Now, they do say that you get 112 miles of range, in the marketing materials. Is that accurate, or like, what do you think?
It's accurate based on most manufacturers' testing techniques, which is a lightweight rider, closed course in eco mode, or normal mode with pretty much a steady state of speed. How our test differed from that is there was lots of stop and start and full open race mode, which you could throw your economy ratings out the window if you're going to ride it like that. But it's how most people would ride that bike. With the dual batteries, it does have strong, snappy performance, and it's a lot of fun to ride that way. I
was a little self-conscious, riding this thing. I had Paul up front just because he looked more like a regular bike. But no complaints, super silent. Yeah, and then when I hit the street, when I hit a wide open area, I just let loose. And that's pretty much the thrilling part of the Segway Xyber. I think we covered all the questions for this follow-up Segway Xyber video. Thanks, Paul. We'll see you soon.
Thank you.